This is a podcast by the Straits Times.
Welcome to Work Talk. I'm Krist Boo. This episode, we're talking about a profession that most, if not all of us have interactions with, the public service. With 152,000 employees across 16 ministries and more than 40 agencies, the public service is the biggest department in town. It reports to the government, but has a higher boss, Singaporeans who scrutinise its performance and spending. Why would somebody want to be a public servant? Can you have a good public service career without a degree? Will the public service ever lay off workers in this era of AI disruption? We take on these questions and take a look at its bigger challenges and mission. We're pleased to have the Minister in charge of Public Service, Mr. Chan Chun Sing, here with us. Minister, thanks for joining us today. It's such a pleasure to have you. And today we are talking about the public service. Over the last few years, we've seen a lot of changes in technology, as well as the challenges such as an aging population, a talent crunch, a higher demand for work-life balance come into the workplaces. And I just want to get your take on how things have changed for the public service in terms of the challenges, the nature of public servants that you are seeing today. So maybe the first question for you is, how do you see the job cut out for you today compared to when you took on the post of Minister in charge of Public Service in 2018?
So what have changed? And perhaps I should also, to be fair, cover what has not changed. So perhaps we cover what has changed. Of course, we all know that the world and the global environment has become more challenging. People in different countries are breaking into different blocks. There's greater political contestation, geopolitical contestation across the world. The economic situation has become more fragile. The rapid technological changes have brought both opportunities and also quite a lot of disruptions across the global economy. And many countries are having to adapt and adjust to this. And we are no different from this. And the media environment has also changed. It's much more difficult to bring people together, and people have more diverse views, more diverse aspirations. So all these, I think, have changed. But I think for us in the public service, there are certain things that will not change. For us, the first thing that will not change is our mission. Our mission is to build a thriving Singapore for all Singaporeans across the ages, where every generation of Singaporeans will have the sense of hope and opportunity regardless of their starting background. Multiracialism, incorruptibility, service before self, meritocracy, all these are things that will not change. And the most important thing that I think the public service will never change is the fact that we always take care of our people. And if we take care of our public service officers well, they will take care of the larger mission of taking care of Singapore and Singaporeans.
You have the civil service or the people who make the policies, the higher rank, and then you have the rank and file, like the librarians, the customer service at CPF and so on, the teachers. And then you have the young government scholars who are coming into the workforce as well, the younger, might mean starting up in their careers. And when you talk about that three challenges, and it seems to me that cohesion and bringing it together, this whole new group of civil servants with new aspirations and new challenges, bring them into the future together is like an underlying theme. Am I reading that right?
What's the difference between a public officer and someone who, say, work in the commercial sector? If you are in the commercial sector, you have very clear KPIs, objectives. Maybe is it your top line or your bottom line, to produce a new product and so on and so forth. Those are good and those are important things that we do. But in the public service, I think it's slightly different because you are trying to take care of your people now, and yet you are trying to shape the future for a better future for our people. Of course, the challenges will keep evolving, but so long as we put our people always front and center of what we do, we won't get very far wrong. We must never put our own interest before that of our people, not before that of our country. So that's what we ask of our public officers. But how we do it must constantly evolve. In today's world, we will need the public service officers to be much more sensitized to what is happening beyond Singapore. So it's not about just looking inward of what we can do to take care of Singaporeans. In fact, to take care of Singaporeans well, we need to be very keenly aware of what's happening around the world. For example, the geopolitical tensions. What does it mean for us to earn a living? What does it mean for us to secure our lifelines? Right? For example, the wider world of technological changes. What are the challenges and what are opportunities? all these require the public service to look beyond. So, for example, when I was in the trade and industry ministry, the whole world can talk about how the global system is breaking up, different countries are forming different blocks, economic blocks, and how this will threaten the livelihood of Singapore because our survival depends on us being able to connect with different parts of the world. Then part of the job of the public officers in MTI, the Ministry of Trade and Industry, is to ask ourselves, who can we work with to bring people together instead of having people go in different ways? And not just people, not just countries, but also companies. How can we gather, if you like, the coalition of the willing so that we can find like-minded partners to continue to build up that network that allows Singapore to survive and thrive?
So in the last 6 years running, heading this department, we've had COVID, the pandemic, we've had corruption trial, and then recently we have had AI. So could you tell us a story or an anecdote about what was the most critical or most challenging moments that you faced?
Well, I've shared this story before about COVID. During COVID, MTI and myself, we were in charge of making sure that we continue to have the supplies from food to critical essential materials from all across the world. So we have this story whereby we wanted to go and buy rice from another country, and the person said that, I'm not going to sell you rice. Then we asked, why not? Because you have surplus rice, and even if you don't sell it to us, because of COVID, the rice might rot. But the person told us that, well, if I sell you rice, then and my people get to know it, they might panic, and then I may have riots on my street, I may have a political problem. So I'm not going to sell you rice even if you pay me more. So this is an important lesson for all of us in Singapore. I mean, we never take our existence for granted. We never believe that people will just trade with us on the basis of charity nor sympathy. We need to have a value proposition for others who say that, I want to work with you, I want to trade with you because you produce something that I want, and even in a crisis beyond money, we are going to continue to work together. So this is an important lesson for all of us.
So the stories that you've highlighted pertain quite a lot to the civil service, the civil servants who actually have a lot of say in how Singapore handles or reacts to situations in the world. So when you're looking at the public service, where you have a lot more rank and file officers, some of them who might have been in public service for 20, 30 years, what do you see as the challenges for this group of public servants?
First thing I must say is this, that every member of the 150,000 strong public service that you mentioned, they all play their roles. You need everyone to believe that they can make a difference and they are important in their respective stations. So I give a very simple example. Someone who is at the front counter handling public requests, feedback, complaints. To the person behind the counter, this might be just another feedback, another comment, another complaint. But to the person who is giving this, it means the world to the person. And we must understand from their perspective how, in resolving that issue, we can help the person become much more positive, much more constructive. How we can help him to overcome, and in helping him to overcome, we build a better system. Of course, we are not saying that we do this for the individual at the expense of the system. But how do we reconcile the individual needs and the societal needs? And everyone at different level can make important contributions. So it's not just about the perm sec at the highest level making policies that will then become very important. But because what is a good policy that cannot be well executed? And in order for us to deliver, it needs not just good policies at the top, it requires every level of worker to be able to understand not just what to do, how to do, but why we are doing this. So the strength of public service is not just about people executing orders. It's about people understanding the intent, the end goal that they need to achieve, and then as situation evolve, come up with new ways to overcome those challenges. That's how we are able to move fast and move powerfully as a team.
So what are you doing, or what is your team doing to make this maybe down the different levels understand the intent?
This is always a work in progress. How do we do this? Many ways. First, we want to expose our officers to a diverse work environment. That includes the domestic work environment and the international work environment. Because in order to formulate any policies or before we even do anything, we must understand the context that we are in. Second, for those people with potential, we want to expose them to diverse areas of work. For example, policy making, operations, communications, or even international connections. For many of our officers, we also cross-post them to different agencies, partly for them to see new perspective, bring back fresh ideas to do what they have previously done.
And this is a question that's especially pertinent to you because you're also the Minister of Education. And that question is, does joining the public service without a degree mean that your career will never take off?
No, in fact, actually, we have many successful public officers making very important and valuable contributions in their own ways, regardless of whether they have a degree or not a degree. If you use my own example, one of my best mentors in the public service was someone who never had a degree. He gave me a lot of worldly wise advice. He gave me a lot of real world experiences that he has gathered. And I think that's how we complement one another. And I think that's the beauty of the public service, because we are such a big service. We have that diversity of talent. You can come from different backgrounds. You can have different skill sets. All we ask for is that you have one united goal, and that is to keep improving the lives of Singaporeans and Singapore's position in the world.
May I ask who that mentor was?
That mentor, his name is Yo Idik. He was my commander in the military.
Okay. And then, well, that takes us to the next bit, which is that we're seeing a lot of layoffs in the private sector. Will we ever see layoffs in the public sector?
Well, actually, in any organization, including the public sector, there will always be some churn in the organization. There are people who come and join us, there will be people who leave, and there are some people who have left and come back and join us. So there's a certain porosity in all this. In the private sector, very often people have to be caught up in the day-to-day operations and to make the bottom line and so on and so forth. But in the public sector, we have actually made a commitment to ourselves to dedicate time, to set aside time to keep training our people. So for example, besides all the mandatory courses, the milestone courses that our public officers go through, during my time together with the public service leadership, we made a commitment to all our public officers that everyone will have the opportunity every year to go and learn something on your own, 40 hours per year. And because the public service is so big, we are more able than others to so-called redeploy officers to other roles that might better fit their abilities. But of course, at the end of the day, there will still be a very small proportion of officers who, for their different aspirations or for their different skill sets, might choose to leave the public service. But having said that, on the whole, I think the public service is much more fortunate compared to many other organizations in terms of the amount of time that we can commit to training our officers and deploying them across diverse roles.
But despite all the best intentions to upscale or redeploy your resources, well, I think the truth is that technology has really upended a lot of jobs. At this point in time, do you rule out layoffs in the public service?
We have never do it one way or the other, in a sense that saying that there's no layoff or there's be layoff. That's never our philosophy. Whenever there's a disruption in the job requirement, we will always ask ourselves, how can we upskill the officers to do the new job? And for those officers who cannot be upskilled to do that job, we ask ourselves, how can we try to reskill them in other jobs? But this is also a match between the individual and the organizational needs, because some officers might say that, oh, well, I don't want to do this and I just want to go somewhere else. And that's perfectly fine. And if I may add, it's not just about the disruption of the technology. In fact, today, many Singaporeans work much longer and have longer working lives. And that can be a competitive edge for the public service. So I give some example. Many of our older workers, the experienced workers, actually they have a wealth of experience and they have the aptitude, if you like, to manage many of these challenging cases, and they are helping us to do so. So today, if we walk around some of the social service centers that we have across the island, you see that many of them are no longer dealing with single issues because they are dealing with a multitude of issues that people may come with. It's not just about the competencies of how to deal with HDB, LTA problems, and that part is the easier part. But how do you deal with a complex case that is perhaps emotionally vested in this, and then it requires a certain maturity, which is why, in a work like that, you can see just an example of the diverse nature of work and diverse skill sets required from our public officers in order to overcome the challenges of today and prepare for tomorrow.
And your department has about 400 people, and it oversees kind of the whole public service, which has 60 ministries and over 40 agencies. Well, and the whole gamut of work for public servants range from everything to libraries, to CPF, to HDB. There's also kind of a limited level of control you can have over how service is executed on the ground. and how the public servants are managed in the agencies, for example. So how do you deal with that?
I want to perhaps correct this perception that somehow the public service is monolithic, that there is one minister on top and then, it's somehow like a pyramid, and then some instructions will flow down and then everybody will execute it in the same way. No, in fact, actually that is the furthest from the truth. Of course, at the central, you have certain ministries and they perform the ministries' function, policy making, operations planning, communications, and so forth. But you have also many statutory boards that perform functions in their own way. How EDB does its work is quite different from how JTC does its work, and quite different from NLB, the National Library Boards, or any other boards. And this is the beauty of the public service, because the recruits that we get, they are of such diverse personalities and interests, and we are able to find a match for them as far as possible across that diverse agencies. And one of the important things, going back to what I said, that so long as you understand, importantly, the why, then the what and the how is second order. Then you can allow the agencies to innovate in their respective ways to get the job done. So, like for example, let's say parking enforcement. Right? In the past, parking enforcement might be quite labor intensive. But if let's say tomorrow the parking enforcement department decides that they want to try a new way of doing things, they're perfectly free to go and innovate and try new ways of doing things and redeploy their manpower to doing something else. And this is very common in the public service, be it in the police force, in the armed forces, in any of the public agencies that we deal with. For example, if you go to the libraries today, in the past, I always wanted to be a librarian because whenever I go to a library, I see someone sitting behind the library, taking out my card and stamping the book before I leave. But today, you don't see librarians doing that, right? You don't see librarians doing that because we have automated all this. Instead, you see librarians running programs, getting students or children to be interested in reading, helping young parents to guide their children. So you see them doing many more interesting things. They're still called librarians, but the job scope has changed quite a lot.
I have a question for the young job seekers. What's in it for them in public service?
Well, you can make money in many organizations, but there's only one place in Singapore that you can shape the future of Singapore and serve Singaporeans, and that's the public service.
So another question, we have an aging population and we have a lot of mid-career people, some of them not being able to get back into the workforce because of the digitization. Question for you is, we're talking about, people in their mid-career, midlife, sometimes midlife crisis, having this romanticized idea about joining the public service, being a teacher or being something that they could contribute. But after taking up the job, find that it's actually not what they thought it was. What advice would you give to mid-career job seekers? In the first place, do you want them? In the second place, if you want them, what can they do to ensure they are successful?
So let me answer the question by first saying that we don't look at people whether you mid-career or a fresh graduate. That's not the most important thing. The most important thing for anyone looking for a job in the public service, and maybe I should say that for anyone looking for any job, even beyond the public service, is not to have preconceived ideas of what it is. Very often, it is not like, this is the job, these are my skill sets, I try to get a match. That's important to a certain extent. But the job will evolve and the skill sets required will also evolve. So what are we looking for as a good public service officer, never mind mid-career or otherwise? The most important thing is the ability to learn and keep learning, the ability to adapt, because the circumstances will evolve. We don't expect anyone to come in and say that I know everything. There's no such potential employee that will know everything about the job before they come in. But all we hope for are people who can work as a team, people who are prepared to keep learning. And to us, that is the most important. And behind all that must be a sense of purpose and mission.
What is top of mind for you now with regards to this job, heading the public service?
Well, I hope that the public service will continue to be the pride of our nation and the envy of others.
In terms of implementation, is it integration or what is it, upskilling that is really top of mind for you right now?
At this point in time, there's not one single thing that will say that if you do this, then the whole public service will transform. In fact, actually, we need a plethora of skill sets. We need people who can deeply understand the world that we are operating in, people who are constantly scanning the global environment outside, technological environment outside, asking ourselves, what do we need to do differently? We need people who can do operations, people with very good ground feel, not just people who come up with good policies. How do you translate those good policies into good operations, understanding the context that we have to work in and the people that we have to work with, right? We need people who can communicate, not just in the traditional ways, but also in new ways, right? We need people who can have the gumption to keep chugging along, even though times are tough. And our job is never to look for that one individual or that one skill set. Our job is always to look for that one team with those diverse skill sets in order to best deliver the mission for Singapore.
Do you have difficulty finding people like that?
I must say that I am more fortunate than many of my counterparts overseas, because today the Singapore Public Service is still the pride of our nation, and people want to join us, not just because we pay well or because the work environment is great, but because I think people have a sense of mission. They know that if you join the Singapore Public Service, it's not just about the top line or the bottom line. When you join the Singapore Public Service, you are part of a team that will shape the future of our country to deliver better quality of life for our people, to create greater relevance for Singapore on the world stage.
I was having a conversation with the intern just before this. And also in my conversations with some public servants, they're always saying that, well, they are bonded, they are scholars, and they are taking on the job because it is the most secure job in this environment. They don't actually like the job. And also some of the comments sometimes is, when the government says that it wants flexible work, it wants to do a lot of good intentions, it doesn't always cascade down. There's a lot of performative work that they have to do. For example, just taking part in all these pro-family meetings and so on. So just like any private organization, they have the same challenges. But when it comes to the public service, they always hold it to a higher standard. And so some public servants themselves are saying that, it's not what they thought it would be. Or some young people are saying, I'm in it because I'm bonded, it pays for my school. Not that I like to teach, for example. What do you say to this?
First, I'm very happy to hear you say that people hold the public service to higher standards. That shows that actually we are not just any other organization. Second thing, I would say that in any organization, as you have described, commercial, public or private, there will be ups and downs. We never say that we are a perfect public service. We will always say that we are a public service that is striving always to improve. We all have bosses that are nice. We all have bosses that are not so nice. We all have work environments that are sometimes challenging. We have work environments that sometimes are a joy. But through it all, I think it's not just what we find, but it's also what we give. When we are determined to contribute, to give and to improve, then I think we'll make for a better world. You take my own personal experience as an example. When I first took up the scholarship, I have absolutely no idea what I was going into. And perhaps you are right, it's a very practical considerations. I needed to complete my studies and I was hoping for a job. But as I go into the public service, starting with the military service, I realized that it's not just what the organization gives me that matter. It is also what I put in that matter. When I'm given the job to take care of a platoon of men, 28 men, I try to do my best to make sure I take good care of them. And then whether they are willing, not willing, they are able, not able, we will try to do our best as a team. And it's that sense of making a contribution regardless of your stations, and never say that if one day I become this person, I become the PERMSEC, I become the chief of army or become someone, I will do things differently. I have learned from young that every one of us, regardless of our stations in life, have a circle of influence that we can start from there. That each and every one of us can make a positive contribution in our circle of influence, regardless of positions. And it will always be too late for us to think that one day we will be able to make a contribution when we get into a certain positions.
Thank you for coming, Minister.
Thank you for having me.
It's been such a pleasure. We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Work Talk, a podcast series that helps you work smarter, think deeper, and get ahead in your work life. I'm Krist Boo. Our producer is Amirul Karim. The supervising editor is Ernest Lewis. From all of us here, have a good work week.
Send your feedback to podcast@sph.com.sg. Find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or within our Straits Times app. Thanks for listening.